Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has completely flip-flopped on the issue of COVID-19 vaccines. He not only supported former President Trump's vaccine rollout, called Operation Warp Speed, but he welcomed pandemic resources with open arms to the tune of $480 million and showered Trump with praises for his vaccine delivery efforts throughout 2020 and 2021.
But in recent weeks, some are saying he's done a reversal, starting with his announcement last week of a statewide investigation into alleged wrongdoing related to the COVID vaccines. DeSantis, who is very likely to be a 2024 GOP president primary contender, could be trying to set himself apart from Trump should he make a run. Here to discuss whether DeSantis is flip-flopping is Jeff Charles, the host of a Fresh Perspective podcast and a Newsweek opinion contributor. Welcome back, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on.
So is this a flip-flop?
I'm not sure. I don't think he's gone fully anti-vax. But it sounds like he's changed his mind. A lot of people have changed their minds on the vaccination because we were kind of sold a bill of goods when it first came out and then realized that it was less effective than it was advertised. But I don't see him necessarily saying, no, don't take the vax or anything like that. But at the same time, it could be politically motivated. One thing that I've always said is that if he does run, Trump's biggest vulnerability with the base is his salesmanship when it comes to the vaccine. So it could be both, or it could be just political.
I actually think that you're right here, Jeff. There is a large political understanding. I think that the Florida governor isn't often given credit for. He knows the environment. He knows that it's ripe for newness that is not Donald Trump. He also knows that there are several conservatives, particularly in places like Florida, who are anti-vax, who quite frankly were excited by this emergence of subvariants that kind of lessened the effect of the vaccine. So now they're saying, okay, of all the people who went out and got the COVID vaccine and got multiple boosters, guess what? COVID's not gone. You're still getting COVID, and we're proven right, which scientifically that's not how it works. But I do think that there is an audience for this type of rhetoric. What do you see as the backdrop here? We know that COVID-19 is going up, particularly around the holidays. What do you see as, is this going to be problematic, or do you think that this is bolstering him for a potential 2024 run, and he's going to look back at these comments and possibly have a highlighting moment?
It's possible. If you look at the numbers, most Republicans have taken at least one or two doses of the vaccine. So it's not like the base is really that much adamantly against the vaccine. But it is a risky move. But at the same time, he might be trying to take people from Trump's base who are already vaccine hesitant. It might end up being a brilliant move. Because like I said, that is Trump's biggest vulnerability with the base. And you have a lot of people, especially over the past few months, who are switching from Trump to DeSantis. Even people who like Trump, they're ready to move on. And I think DeSantis is seeing that it's time to strike while the iron is hot. And this is one of the issues to do it with. Now, he's going to need more than this if he's going to beat out Trump for the nomination. But I see this as him laying the groundwork. This is probably the beginning.
I think that there was a position on the right that was consistently pro-vax but anti-mandate, that it was very much in the Democrats' interest to act like anybody who was anti-mandate was also anti-vax. And I could see DeSantis justifying this switch on those grounds. But isn't there a sort of almost like a tragic Shakespearean quality to this? Because, how many lives did Trump save with Operation Warp Speed, only to now be punished for it electorally by people who are alive because of him? No, isn't there something like deeply, there's so much pathos to that. Don't you agree?
Yeah, what's very interesting about this, Bachi, is that there isn't that much daylight between DeSantis and Trump on vaccines. Trump was never for vaccine mandates, and he made that very clear. He still got booed when he talked about how he got the booster shot. DeSantis, same thing. He was praising the vaccines when they first rolled out, and now he's kind of changed his tune, but he still hasn't gone to the point where he's telling people not to get the vaccine. So it's not really much of a distinction here between how they feel. They say the same thing. Consult your doctor, make your own healthcare decisions. This should not be mandated. But I think that Ron DeSantis is going to take advantage of the fact that Trump was more gung-ho about the vaccine than people would have liked him to be.
Jeff, there are a few people more popular in their states when it comes to governors than Ron DeSantis happens to be. So when I'm looking at something like this in correlation with what both you and Batya just said, I do think that there is possibly going to be an uptick for Ron DeSantis. He is playing his cards and playing them out well. It's a long road to 2024, and we know that any given day something could happen and this whole thing could change. But we're also looking at a former president in Donald Trump who just issued some version of virtual playing cards. It looks like Ron DeSantis is essentially the adult in the room, even if people don't necessarily always agree with what he's saying, particularly around this the vaccine and being seemingly not as pro-vaccine as he used to be. What is your take on it?
Yeah, well, the polling among Republicans before Trump announced still had Trump beating DeSantis. But that gap has closed, and now that he's announced, DeSantis is pulling ahead in most of the polls that are coming out. And Trump isn't doing himself any favors by, having dinner with Kanye West and accidentally having dinner with Nick Fuentes and then coming out with NFTs after saying that there's going to be a huge announcement. I think that made him, he really made himself look silly. I don't know if he's listening to bad advice or if he's just going on his gut, but DeSantis is smart to take advantage of it. And I do believe that these numbers will continue. Unless DeSantis does something incredibly stupid, I think his star is going to continue to rise. It doesn't guarantee that he'll win the nomination, but at this point, it's not a foregone conclusion like it was earlier this year when the favorite was clearly former President Trump.
Jeff, when I look at what President Trump's base voted on, I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that they were the main issues for them were things like immigration, foreign wars, a lot of stuff, around, class issues, the class divide. I'm wondering, when you look at DeSantis, do you see him being able to pick up on that populist energy around issues like foreign wars, around issues like trade? Trump was so protectionist when it came to the economy. It's very hard to tell where DeSantis is on economics and international relations, foreign policy, because he doesn't have there's not a lot of room in the governor's role for making big statements along those lines. But what is your sense from watching him? Is he going to be able to tell the base that he has their back on those issues as well? Is that something that you see coming, or is he going to sort of trend back to that sort of free market, Mitch McConnell era, Reaganite GOP?
Yeah, it remains to be seen, Batya. DeSantis knows how to play the game. He's a very good and savvy politician. But you're right, there are a lot of unknowns about DeSantis. That isn't the case with Trump. We know where Trump stands on foreign policy, on trade, and all these other issues, but DeSantis has never really had to speak to it. So he's going to have to figure out the messaging that he needs to use. If he goes in full neocon, then guess what? Trump's going to be the nominee because the base doesn't want that. Nobody wants that on the right. There are indications of votes that he has made in the past when he was in Congress that he may lean towards that direction. Critics of DeSantis are using his supposed ties to the establishment. The people who funded Trump are now trying to fund DeSantis, and they're using that to paint him as more of an establishment figure. But really, it's going to be up to DeSantis whether or not those things stick. It's going to depend on what he says when he gets on the campaign trail. I actually expect him to adopt more of Trump's more interventionist policies, less intervention, maybe even on trade. I don't know what he'll do on trade, but I do expect him to mimic more of what Trump was doing, but to cast himself as a more upgraded version of Trump, which is how people see him anyway. So that would be the smart thing to do.
Yeah, I think that he's, to your point, Jeff, I think he's going to take the if it ain't broke, don't fix it model. But we also have to remember that this is a guy who had been in Congress. So we do have kind of a record of his political leadership, which we did not have when Trump first ran. This is also somebody who, and we haven't seen a lot of this in the modern era, but somebody who actually served in the military. I think that there is a lot of there when it comes to fully understanding what he's doing. But because, to Batya's point, he is in the governorship, he's not going to or hasn't had the opportunity to outwardly discuss those, which he is going to have to, should he assume this role and should he, as I think we all expect, be a real contender in 2024.
Yeah, he is going to have to. And, I expect him to do it well. He's good at what he does. And that is a big danger to Trump. And if he can effectively portray himself as, hey, this is what you got with the last guy, you're going to get with me, but without all the drama. Honestly, that's what the base wants. They want the same policies They want the same pugilistic attitude towards the media. DeSantis has that in spades. He doesn't have the level of charisma that Trump has, but I think they want a more polished candidate who will still pursue the agenda without getting into silly Twitter feuds and having to deal with all the stuff that he says. So I think that DeSantis has a real opportunity here where previously I didn't think he had much of one.
And Jeff, what's your take on the way the media sort of, I mean, a lot of us saw this coming, but, when Trump was in office, their major complaint against him, the way they portrayed it was, he's a norm breaker, a rule breaker, right? Like it was about his character, right? About his, the gross way that he talked, the undignified things he said, right? And they said, look, we just give us a normal, it's not that we don't want Republicans to exist, just give us a normal one, right? Okay, now you've got someone like DeSantis, right? Who's, he doesn't come out and say, casually racist things. He doesn't tweet all day. But now they're saying, oh, DeSantis is even worse than Trump, right? He's an effective Trump. What's your take on how the media is treating him and what we can expect looking forward?
I think the media still views Trump as the boogeyman, which I don't think is smart. I mean, there have been a few op-eds that I've seen talking about how Governor DeSantis is more dangerous to them than Trump is. But I don't think the rest have woken up to that yet. I still think that they're sleeping on DeSantis. They're doing so less so now, especially with the polling. And some seem to suggest that they would rather have him running against them. I think DeSantis would be the harder candidate to beat. But if it takes the Democrats too long to realize that, he might just slip into the White House. I mean, I think that's what's going to happen. I mean, you fast forward to 2024, it's hard to have that crystal ball to know what's going to happen. But if people are still dissatisfied with the way Biden has run things and with the way Democrats have performed in Congress, DeSantis has a really good chance to say, hey, maybe I can be the uniter that Biden said he would be. Here's what I'm going to do for the American people. And again, you're not going to have to worry about a bunch of drama. I think people are just tired of drama.
And Jeff, we could probably talk to you about this forever, but that is all the time we have. Looking forward to having you back in the near future. More Rising after this.
Thanks for having me.